Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the BPTAC meeting for Monday, June 2026. My name is Alan Woolwich. I'm the vice chair and I'm filling in for Angelica Keene this evening. So call the meeting to order and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible. Okay, we'll go into public comment. Is there anybody here this evening that would like to make public comment on any of the non-agenda items? Seeing none, we'll move on to number 3, reports, with the executive director's report and Georgiana Gillette.
Right. In your package, there are several attachments. The TPO's project updates for the rail crossing safety update, where we're at as far as the grant agreements are concerned, and some of the other projects that the TPO is currently working on in-house. You also have the public engagement report for May and June. These are all of the activities that Leah and Abby have been working on. The TPO's followers, our webpage views, as well as all of the safety outreach engagement and community partnerships that we have had. So they've been extremely busy. So that is the director's report.
Okay, Georgiana, thank you. We'll move on to the FDOT report with Porna Bhattacharya.
I don't have anything to report.
Okay, thank you, Porter. On to the consent agenda. The only item on there for this evening is the BPTAC minutes from April 27th, 2026. So I'll need a motion and a second and vote on approval of the minutes. Anybody have any questions or edits or anything to the minutes?
Make a motion for approval.
I got the second. Second, Carl Kaiserman has made the motion, second by Marie Hahn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent agenda minutes pass unanimously. And we will move on to our action items this evening, and Sarah Krim will present on the fiscal year 28 list of project priorities.
Good evening. I'm Sarah Kroll, I'm the Senior Transportation Planner for the Space Coast TPO. This is our annual review of our list of project priorities. As many of you are aware, as we've gone through this process with us before, we are required to annually adopt a list of project priorities. I have a short presentation that kind of talks about the process, and then we'll actually go to the list. There has been very few changes. I did update the presentation this morning to include a little bit more details of how these projects relate to Bike Ped. So, and the high entry network. And so that was, the presentation is a little bit different from what was included in the agenda package. However, there were copies of the sign-in table, as well as also a copy of the 3 public comments that we received and our responses. All right, so I know many of you are familiar with our planning bridge, but basically these are 3 of our core products, and they work together to get projects built. And so we start off with a long-range transportation plan. This is a 25-year lookout to try to project what potentially are our transportation resources, as well as our funding resources, as well as also our transportation needs. Projects are prioritized the long-range transportation plan, and any project that is cost feasible, long-range transportation plan is eligible to go on the list of priority projects. So that's where we're at in this presentation. Once those projects actually have money on them, they are included in the transportation improvement program. We then go through a very robust process just within the span of the bridge, the list of project priorities that starts off with a call for projects. goes to application submittal, evaluation and ranking, adoption of the list of project priorities, and ultimately we submit them to FDOT. Once FDOT has them, they review the applications. If there's any meetings that need to be vetted, and then we work hand in hand with FDOT to program funds onto the actual projects. And eventually projects are either administered via the local agency program or implemented by FDOT, which would only happen if it was a state road. So what's new this year? We updated the project funding in phases. So any project who might have received funds last year or that needed to pursue a different phase, we updated that. We updated the scores based on the latest state of the system and high entry network. So we actually saw some projects that no longer were on the high entry network and some that are now on the high entry network. As we look at a 5-year rolling average. We moved the Cocoa multimodal station to grants and appropriation list because we felt like this really was the proper list within our list project priorities for it to be, as it is not pursuing the TPO's federal funds, but rather a grant or appropriation. We moved several projects to fully funded lists. We moved several projects to Canvas list, which I'll talk a little bit more about once we get there. And we added 4 new projects to the grant and appropriations and 1 TISMA project. So we had 2 fully funded projects that came off the list. The first is the Cape Canaveral Spaceport ITS project. And so this was state funding to add ITS on the NASA Causeway and Space Commerce Way. And then we have the West Central Avenue Bridge on Merritt Island. That was a state appropriation that the county received. We then have 2 projects that we were able to move off completely to the completed projects list. The Parish Park Trailhead at Maxborough Bridge. This was funded via a federal grant as well as also Space Coast TPO funding. And then we have the NASA Boulevard sidewalk from Eddie Allen to Evans that Melbourne completed this year, completely funded by the Space Coast TPO. And just to give an idea of inflation, the project was funded, and I think originally we put the money on in 2019. It was a $700,000 project. It literally doubled and was a $1.4 million project by the time it actually went to construction.
How long was that? Just briefly. How long a trail was that?
As long as a mile,
Probably
2 miles. We did have 1 new project submitted, the Lake Washington ITS project. This was submitted by the city of Melbourne to enhance the ITS system to include fiber, CCTV, and other upgrades. This slide was not updated. It does have an updated cost estimate that's reflected in your agenda package on the actual list. And then, so this would be more converted to US1. Strategic intermodal system. So I'm just going to go through each of the lists and just touch on projects. There were no changes other than us moving the Cocoa multimodal station off this list. So this list is exactly the same way as it was last year. And we do have those 2 State Road 528 projects that include trail. The regionally significant state roadways, this list also had absolutely no changes. As you will notice, every single project on this list, while it might not necessarily be a trail or sidewalk or bike project, they do include, proper bicycle or pedestrian facilities, depending on the context classification of what's come out of previous studies. So you'll notice there's quite a bit of widenings and there are quite high cost estimates to actually get us to construction. And this is just continued. Have a lot of crosswalk or intersection projects that will also enhance crosswalks. Next, we have the regionally significant non-state roadways. Nothing changed from here except for we removed the Hollywood Boulevard widening at the request of Brevard County. They are taking a step back to try to evaluate some shorter term, lower cost improvements. Just because of the cost right now, the widening of Hollywood Boulevard is just unfeasible due to the costs and the lack of funding sources. And Karina, if there's anything I misspoke about or you'd like to jump in, feel free. Also, as you can see, all of these projects do include, some sort of, bike ped facility with the exception of Minton Road, which I would imagine that when they get into design, that will also include crosswalks and so, as well. Transportation system management and operations. So these are looking at technology or various ITS projects. As I mentioned, we did have the new project added of Lake Washington. Otherwise, this list remains unchanged from last year. Bicycle and pedestrian. There were 2 US1 projects in the Palm Bay area that were removed as they were evaluated through resurfacings and further coordination with FDOT is needed at this time. As well as also, you'll notice that 2 projects 3 and 4 swap places. This would have probably been due to something with the state of the system or the high entry network. Sun trails. So we did have a major change on the Sun Trails list. Just as a reminder, the Sun Trails projects are trails that are specifically on the FDOT Sun Trail network and eligible. The Space Coast Trail within the Mare Island National Wildlife Refuge has been put back on the candidate list. At this time, there is not a maintaining agency that is willing to take over the maintenance for the trail within the Mare Island National Wildlife Refuge, and thus FDOT will not construct it. So the funds are being, as we speak, worked on being moved off the project and going back up to Tallahassee. We're trying to get Tallahassee and B5 to agree to put that funding on the US1 East Coast Greenway trail so that the funds continue to stay at least within Brevard County, if not also in the Titusville community. Because I mean, it's been 20+ years of the community really working towards this project. And it's been quite disappointing for ultimately, due to rising costs and short staff, just no commitment for a maintaining agency.
Sarah, it's my understanding that DOT has requested from central office to be able to move some of the funding to at least complete the full design for the US1 trail. So we've not gotten an update as to whether central office is actually going to allow that to happen or not, but at least they did make that request.
The grants and appropriation, we had 4 new projects added. And as well as also we moved the Cocoa multimodal station. So these projects are not pursuing the Space Coast TPO's federal funds. These are pursuing federal or state grants and appropriations. So these are not competing with any of the other projects above it. So we have the Malabar Road roundabout, which is also, I guess that I really should move off of this list because it's included in the other Malabar Road project and we're expressed that in a different way now. The Big Route Safe Streets and Roads for All Safety project, that grant has already been submitted. Emerson Road widening and a Grissom Parkway widening. So this list of project priorities was presented to our TACCAC as well as our governing board. We then took it for public comment between May 20th and June 20th. We had our annual open house on Tuesday, June 9th. It was very well attended. And we had 2 people that got up and provided public comment on our transportation improvement program, not on our list of project priorities. However, we did have 3 public comments through our comment portal. Those were provided with you at the check-in table. So there was a need to widen South Babcock Street, concerns regarding separation of bike lanes. They want a barrier between bike lanes, and the need to include more bicycle facilities, specifically bike lanes, from very clearly heavy bicycle advocate that we hope to continue our conversations with and get him involved in the planning process. So as far as where we go from here, today we're seeking approval or recommendation of approval by the BPTAC. We'll then go in on July 6th, so a week from now, to our TACCAC, and ultimately to our governing board 2 weeks from now on July 13th. And then we'll transmit this and begin the process of actually programming funds onto these projects. I did, though, want to bounce back to our sidewalk list and just mention that, as you'll notice, every single one of these projects are state roads. And that, is perfectly fine. You can create a partnership with FDOT. But really, ultimately, what we think is that next year, because we do have box funds within our long-range transportation plan to work on sidewalk and bicycle projects, is what we're considering internally is next year doing an exclusive call for projects for specifically bike paths. So you would not be able to submit a new roadway project, but which there are no new roadway projects eligible in our long-range transportation plan anyways, but it would have to be a bicycle or pedestrian project out of one of our plans and programs. So that's something we're tossing around. So for our municipal partners or even our citizen partners, start talking to your cities to see, because there's potential money, but right now we really don't have the projects to be putting the money on.
Is that money only on local streets, or is that on the state facility that may be?
It has to be on federally, federal aid eligible roadway. So if it is not within our plans and programs, it's not eligible. And a lot of like your minor local streets, like I couldn't build sidewalk. I luckily live in a neighborhood that has sidewalks on every street, but we couldn't go in and build a sidewalk on one of your neighborhood streets. It has to be on the federal, it has to be federally aided. If you have questions on if it's federally eligible, where to find me. And with that, there's my info. But happy to take any questions, or also would like to get approval to recommend to our board to approve the list of project priorities.
Sarah, you mentioned the Alamo Road roundabout. Is it a separate project?
So it originally wasn't a separate project. This has kind of been something that's been evolving over the last, I don't know, probably 6 months. And so what is going to happen is it was originally prioritized to include the roundabout. And now Palm Bay would like to take that roundabout and try to advance it more quickly, because the ultimate widening, if you do the full widening, and this is of course Malabar West, I'm sorry, Drew and Murray, if you do the ultimate widening, you're looking at about $170 million. And so this is going to be a long-term project versus they feel like they could break that roundabout out. From my understanding, they've met with the county and are, in the middle of really working it. So they submitted a separate application for the roundabout to FDOT this year. And as you'll notice on the regionally significant non-state roadways, Malabar has been up as 1A and 1B.
Where would the roundabout be?
At St. John's Heritage Park. Well, they have submitted a federal appropriation, but as I mentioned, it is eligible for the TPO fund because it is within our long-range transportation plan. So, as well as also the city does have, Tanya, how much money? What was it, 800,000 for matching?
Yes, we need.
Up to $1 million for matching funds. So as I've mentioned before, a lot of the projects that are moving forward are projects that have funding partners. Because, with the TPS limited funds and how expensive projects are, it's getting more and more difficult for us to completely fund the project. I mean, for example, the Ellis Road widening had 3, 4, 5, 6 different funding partners, and I think it was 17 different funding sources to get that road widening. You're welcome.
About the trail that you said Mare Island National Refuge has no one to take care of it, and that money's going back up to the state. So does that mean it's coming off of the list of project priorities and going back to the long range, or it's staying there as an unfunded?
So there are two different Space Coast trails, and so one of the Space Coast trails is remaining, and that's essentially just to leverage NASA whenever they resurface Playland Beach to get them to add bike lanes, was what the PD&A came out of. The trail is going on to the candidate project list. So that's a separate list that basically it's almost like a parking lot. So we're not saying the trail's going away, we're not taking it out of our master plans, the long range transportation. But FDOT just will not build it due to a lack of a maintaining agency.
Since that's such a, I just have a question, since that's such a great project. I mean, for tourism, economic development, all those great things. Who would be a sponsor to logically do that in that area? I mean, if it's probably not gonna be the local municipality, unless they see the value in it, who else would it be?
Well, it was originally supposed to be the Merritt Island National Wildlife Refuge. And they were at the table from, the corridor study, PD&E, design. And regretfully, during last winter, spring area, they, received incredible staffing and budget cuts. And basically at that time felt like they could no longer be the maintaining agency. At that point, FDOT reached out to Brevard County and Titusville, which of course it's not within, it's within NASA limits. It's not within the city of Titusville and it's not within Brevard County. So yeah, right now, we're left without someone to maintain it. I've personally been involved with the project for 10 years. The Space Coast CPO 20 years. So we're still gonna maintain optimistic and keep pushing forward, but we're just gonna have to wait till there's some changes.
We'll roll with it.
It's very unfortunate because the bigger is $13 million. So a lot of people would love to get their hands. So we want to try to maintain some of it.
Yeah, as much as you can, and maybe as the political winds change, or you might be able to get back to that place. That's a shame. So, is there an estimate of how much it will cost them to maintain that thing once it's underground? Was there any?
I don't have it off the top of my head, but DOT did have those conversations with them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it got that far.
It did. I mean, at one point there were agreements sitting in lawyers' offices. This was, it had really gotten far, yeah.
Thanks for.
Bruce hand.
Push mine here. Just real quick, I did know, this may be a good point, but tag on to what I want to mention as the Brevard County, really tourism board, or I know there's a huge interest because we encountered that with Malabar going for the, Office Greenways, the trail being recognized as a trail town, that there's huge dollar emphasis on trying to zoom in on really it's the cake, as far as the port and the whole thing, but where Brevard tourism might be interested, it might be dollars by the commissioners. I'm sure that was approached and just thought I should ask. Actually,
They were, well, at least, the Brevard County was made aware of the situation given the opportunity.
to bail out.
Yeah, I just had a couple observations. Thanks for putting this together, showing the projects that are on the Vision Zero high injury network. So we're making progress with our larger projects. They're close to fruition, and those that are way into design, are way into design stage too. So that's good to see. And then actually that there's some trails involved with a lot of these larger projects. So we're comprehensively looking at all our challenges and our desires. So that's good. That's good to see. So appreciate that. I just had a question. When I look at a lot of these projects, and I know a lot of them, maybe coming into design or a lot of them are pre-design. What assurances are we getting that the best practices are going to be applied to all of these projects, especially the widening ones and the interchange projects? When I see widening projects, I'm thinking wider, more lanes, more volume, higher speeds. And as we know, we've got a lot of challenges with that already. So and I see private development that's being funded in public right of ways and related to new development. I'm not seeing the highest and best practices being used for, Vision Zero type concept, which we'll talk about later, especially in design. So, and I know funding can be limited, but who's doing the review for that and making sure that as we're going through with these larger projects, that we're getting the best practices out there. Pedestrian refuge islands, narrower lanes at intersections, all those good tools. Because I see a lot of new development happening and that's not happening, but those that are having public funds involved, obviously, we can have a greater standard, I would hope. So who's looking at that and how is that being managed in the process, in the planning process?
Everyone is looking at it.
Everyone.
Everyone, whenever FDOT does a project, everyone's at the table. They're using context classification to really define, and our high entry network, all of our master plans, to really define what those projects should be. I know it looks like nothing is getting done. But as we literally just sat here today and said, the list of project priorities is exactly the same. Projects aren't moving, not because there's not the will to build sidewalks or bike lanes or trails. They're not moving because there's not the money. That's the bigger problem. But, I think that FDOT has worked really well to provide resources with their large design manual for our local municipalities, as well as the feds with the MUTCD. And I think that all of our locals depend on the resources greatly. And I don't think there's any municipality within Brevard County that isn't wanting to build the project to what's going to be the best for the community. I think when you come to some of the countermeasures, like Leah and Patty are going to share with you later, it's not about the municipality not wanting to do the project, and it's not about the municipality not wanting to have the more expensive project. It's really about public pushback. A lot of the great safety projects that we could have gotten done in the last 10 years, some of them have been killed by public pushback. So I think
That's for individual projects. So.
Correct, yes, but I think really what the call to action on making sure that these things get built isn't necessarily what is happening on the planning and design and engineering side, but really advocates coming out and showing support, because 9 times out of 10, the person that shows up at a public meeting is showing up because they're not happy. They're not showing up because they are happy. And that's really a barrier. And getting some of the things implemented that could really help with efficiency.
And that's what our mayors, elected officials, county commissioners hear is the negative side of things. And it's a circle. So it's a real challenge. It's these public involvement icebergs that are killing some very good projects. And the department, has said that they want to build projects that the public supports.
And that's on the state facility. You're talking about state facilities?
About state facilities.
State facilities.
But we've seen it when Babcock went through
That's true.
PD&E, that was never finalized. Brevard County went through a very thorough process of doing intersection control evaluations of all the major intersections. So there were data-based decisions to put in roundabouts, and those roundabouts got pulled out. Now that PD&E was never finalized, but they got pulled out.
Minton Road is another example.
Minton Road, we wanted to narrow lanes to help slow traffic and be able to put in a full trail. And we got through the first public meeting and everyone loved it. And then the second public meeting, I had 70 people show up virtually because this is during COVID. And basically say, I am unable to drive in an 11-foot lane.
And we hear that a lot.
And we hear that a lot. So, yeah.
Which is just, I understand. That's just.
I think that's funding and public input, which public input's incredibly important. But as I mentioned, I don't think we're seeing the full picture, because you'll have 10 people show up and only one will show up to express their gratitude and interest. But that doesn't necessarily mean that those 9 people represent the majority in the community.
It's good food for thought. 'Cause it's think about as being advocates for that,
Exactly.
each of our communities. So Sounds like you need to represent your areas. If you want something to do, we've got to go out there. I mean, as members of this committee, I think we have the ability to do that. So,
Yeah. it-
we need to, I guess we need to hear when those, when people are speaking against it. And that's, and I see that for, some of these, roundabouts can be controversial. Some of the lane shrinkages can be, but what I'm talking about is more of the routine widenings, that aren't not, that,
Can you give me an example, Alan, of what you're, of like one of these places you've seen this occur?
trying to think, just, and I can't tell whether it was I have to, and I can make a list, and I'll, let's all.
If it's a resurfacing,
Yeah,
that's different from a widening.
right, but I see a lot of things in here that are widening, that aren't gonna be roundabouts, they're not gonna be neck downs, they're not gonna be any shrinkages. They're gonna be widening the existing facility. So,
Providing, they're at least going to provide bike ped facilities on every single one of those. And I can't tell you, I mean, I could go back and sit here and nitpick, like, for example, the Malabar Road widening at St. John's Harris Parkway in Benton has multiple roundabouts within it. The Babcock Street was supposed to have roundabouts, and who knows if when it goes back to PD&E, it will.
but there are other intersection improvements that can be made that are best practices that are not roundabouts.
Correct, they're all.
And, so.
And that's where an
And
intersection.
I don't know that I'm seeing those, so let me look, I'll start looking at intersections and making a list and checking it.
No,
Because I'm seeing stuff that we did 20 years, and it takes a long time to get these done. But I'm seeing new construction and new projects and it's widenings and it's intersections. And it's the same design that we were doing 20 or 30 years ago.
I appreciate.
And I want to work with people, I'd like to see that recognized. I hope we're not doing that with some of these long range projects. Or no, they're not going to be a roundabout. It may not be one of the innovative countermeasures that we'd like to see. But what are we getting with, what improvements are we getting for traditional intersections and crosswalks? And I see a lot of this stuff. There's no pedestrian refuge islands. It's stuff's going in new and you're still taking 70, 80 feet to get across an intersection. And then we have a lot of those we need to fix, and it's not easy to do those.
It's not easy.
So, that's just what I'm concerned about with new projects that may not get through the high innovation test. But what are we getting with our traditional, when I see widening, I'm seeing speeds, seeing volume. So, and if it's to an existing facility, it's gonna make it less, we don't have good countermeasures in those designs and good methods, I just see that we're improving a lot of stuff that was done the same, so.
Well, you need to give us point out a specific project.
Well, and I will, and I'll try to point out ones that need to be fixed too, but where, you put something in new where it could have had a pedestrian refuge island and it takes you 40 feet to get to the pedestrian refuge island and another 40 feet to get across. That's helpful. But what I see with a lot of new development and new work is it's still 90 feet. Where if you put it back one car length or two car lengths, now you're crossing in 40, maybe even less.
Specific examples, we can go talk to whatever the municipality and see if we can find the root of this problem.
Yeah, but I still see that with new construction too. So I want to pick some areas out and I'll show you, but that's what we were doing 20 years ago. And it's new construction. So is that the new Florida design manual? What is it?
Absolutely not the new.
No.
But I can't tell you
Yeah,
specifically.
no, I'll show you some of those things, but I still see that. And I'd like to see that avoided in any of these new projects that we're doing widenings with.
I can assure
That
you,
may
any money that we're putting money on, it's not
Yeah.
gonna not be held up to the standard of doing what is absolutely the best for the community unless the community comes in. I mean, even trail projects, Todd had a fabulous trail project that was fully funded by the TPO and it turned into a sidewalk project because of the community coming out.
All right, well, thanks for listening and I'll
Of course,
put some intersections together and I'll show that. And then we can see if there are public dollars in it or not, or that was just privately off-site improvements that were required by a developer. or new development required by a project.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Alan,
Yeah, no,
for that
thanks.
feedback.
Anybody else have any questions or comments? If not, we'll be looking for recommendation.
Looking for a motion to recommend approval. Yeah.
Need a motion, I'll need a second.
It just seems hard to make a motion on this and then we saw 150 projects go by in 3 minutes and I don't know anything about almost any of them. So, I mean, I guess I'll make a motion to approve the list as is, sort of in ignorance.
Murray, I appreciate that, but literally the list has not changed since last year with the exception of minor changes.
Didn't understand it last year. I mean, we're a bike trail committee and I've seen one small list of actual trail projects. So it's kind of like it's mostly road improvements that happen to include a sidewalk crossing or something like that. So I'll make a motion to approve the list as written.
I'll second the motion. I'll say I've been familiar with this process and the list of project priorities for over 10 years now and how much it's changed. And I agree with Sarah, it hasn't really changed in the last year or two.
Okay, we have a second. We have a motion to approve. All those in favor, say aye. Any opposed?
If I may, to Murray's point, you know, we used to only present the Sun Trails list and the bike path list. And if that's the direction of this board for us to go back to only presenting those two lists. Just a couple of years ago, we thought it gave you a more comprehensive view of what was happening by providing, you know, the roadway projects as well. But if that's your preference, is just to have the two lists, then next year I can narrow down, you know, what we're presenting to make it more keyed in, if that's what your preferences.
I had just a thought, because you had mentioned some of these that are labeled as, you know, maybe capacity type projects, but also include a sidewalk. Can they be, you know, mentioned as both project type? So it doesn't look like it's only one if they're actually doing multiple things. Maybe that would help understand.
We can put additional in the comments. If you go to the comments section, typically we do include that.
Okay, I'm just looking at this chart here,
Yeah.
and so what he's saying, and I'm like, well, this, if it also includes a sidewalk, then it's not only capacity, it's, yeah. So maybe that.
We can definitely look at like that. The page. Okay, thank you.
Going to move on to presentations, and we have Leah and Patty here to present the Vision Zero Toolkit.
Good evening, everyone. Leah Neffo, Community Engagement Coordinator. I'm excited to be presenting today on the Space Coast TPO's brand new Vision Zero Toolkit and summit that we had just this past April. It had been several years since our last summit, and since that time, transportation planning has evolved rapidly alongside emerging technologies. And there's been some significant feats in planning progress, and as always, the heart of a mission remained constant, the vision of living in the world with zero fatalities and serious injuries on our roadways. The vision of zero being the only acceptable number when we speak about traffic violence and crashes, and this mission is reflected in everything we do, from planning, designing, and community. And now more than ever, it's essential that we continue to engage others, encourage everyone to invest their time, voice, attention, commitment to Vision Zero. So let's start at a quick look at how we got here today. Vision Zero is originally a European initiative, and it's only been brought to the America in the 2000s. And this approach, although it sounds simple, redefines how we view traffic safety. It's not an inevitable risk when we drive or walk or roll, but it is a public health crisis. Adopting Vision Zero means a few things, like foregoing traditional approaches and understanding that we prevent tragedy when we prepare for it. When the SCTPO asked municipalities across Brevard to take the pledge, we asked for more than just a verbal commitment. We were asking for a total change of mind and approach. With a lofty goal such as that, we knew we needed engaging and easy to understand materials to accompany us. So in 2020, we launched our first Vision Zero toolkit. As you can see, there's some great yellow branding. And that toolkit helped introduce Vision Zero to our partners, providing a foundation of understanding to a concept that again was unknown to Brevard County at that time. And triumphantly in 2022, every municipality of Brevard County, including Brevard Public Schools, adopted Vision Zero 3 years after our organization did, marking a major milestone for our region. These materials certainly serve their purpose for their time, but as our work has evolved and our branding has grown, as well as our partnerships, it became clear that it was time for a refresh. But what exactly is a toolkit? As defined here, a toolkit is a collection of adaptable resources designed to help individuals and organizations turn idea into action. And what does that really mean? It means giving people practical, ready-to-use tools. Whether that's messaging, templates, or educational materials that make it easier for that next step. Toolkits have been used to support and mobilize many different movements throughout the world, and they're especially effective because they are flexible. There's not a one-size-fits-all approach. They include communication materials and resources that can be used both by professionals and by the broad community. Ultimately, toolkits help turn awareness into action and bridge a gap between understanding a problem and working towards a solution for it. In 2024, the SCTPO published the Vision Zero Action Plan, which provided updated data, strategies, and a clear roadmap for moving forward. What this action plan highlighted is that Vision Zero requires ongoing engagement to be accountable and proactive. Despite our efforts, Florida remains in the top 3 states for pedestrian fatalities out of every state in America. And Brevard County still grapples with painful and preventable traffic fatalities and serious injuries daily. In 2025, over 90 people were killed on Brevard County roadways. Serious injuries and traffic fatalities that continue to impact us remind us that adoption is that only the first step, and implementation is what drives us. So our team looked into updating our toolkit, not just to align with our branding, but to renew passion in our community. And together, the action plan shaped the content of the toolkit, while our updated branding guide influenced its look and feel. What was the goal of the toolkit? At its core, it's really about 2 things, empowering local action and then strengthening advocacy far and wide. We want our toolkit to serve as a resource for those within Brevard County wanting to educate themselves or others. But we also want this toolkit to be used by those in other counties or areas of the world looking to implement Vision Zero themselves that need assistance in beginning that. We worked to create something that people will actually use, something that supports conversation, outreach, and change. As we moved into development, we focused on a few key considerations. We wanted to keep the content clear, concise, and easy to navigate. It was important that the materials would work in a digital and an in-person use, being as we are in a social media age. And we wanted the toolkit to be adaptable for different audiences, fully aligned with SBTPO and Vision Zero branding and messaging. We evaluated what are people talking about? What are common questions I'm receiving at outreach events? What are we receiving in emails and phone calls at our board meetings day to day and more? What are people interested in? The goal was to create something that's not only functional, but really relevant. After establishing those priorities, the process began over a year ago now. We identified key objectives and reviewed Vision Zero toolkits from across the country to understand what works and what hasn't been done yet. From there, in August of 2025, the Vision Zero leadership team participated in a hands-on workshop where we worked through real-world scenarios and considered how different community members might interact with safety messaging. It went something like, as a resident, how can you quickly educate someone ranging from 8 years old to 80 years old? How can you get someone to buy into Vision Zero? what do we need to have every road user be on the same page? And from those discussions, we identified new opportunities for these toolkits. And finally, with all that information and brainstorming, we partnered with HDR who helped bring these ideas to life and shape them into the toolkit that we'll be going over today. So with that, I'm going to pass this to my co-project manager, Patricia Randall, to speak about this material in depth.
All right, so now that Leah set the foundation for where we've been and how we got here, let's take a deeper look at our updated tools in the toolkit. We want to empower our community with all the knowledge at our disposal so we can turn these plans into action and work towards the goal of zero deaths and serious injuries on our roads together. Beginning with the history of Vision Zero, this at-a-glance handout provides context for the safety strategy and a timeline of important global and local milestones. By learning and building upon the experience and proven results set by a worldwide community, we can more clearly envision reaching zero fatalities and serious injuries in our own backyard. So how do we reach this goal? By taking it one step at a time. The Vision Zero sample action plan and timeline is meant to demystify the process of how we turn concepts into actions. This step-by-step roadmap outlines crucial stakeholder roles, what kind of data that needs to be collected, and how to define, prioritize, and measure the progress of short-term goals for long-term wins. These steps are guided by the principles of the safe system approach, that death and serious injury is unacceptable, that humans make mistakes, that humans are vulnerable, responsibility is shared, safety is proactive, and redundancy is crucial. As Leah touched on earlier, in 2022, the SCPO celebrated that Vision Zero resolutions have been adopted region-wide in Brevard County. This ready-to-use resolution was updated with the aim of empowering future partners to affirm their commitment to the strategy of Vision Zero. The resolution gives decision makers clear, defined language to sustain momentum for subsequent policy. This provides clear direction for creating policy changes to make a lasting impact by implementing safety improvements in our community. The Vision Zero Resource Guide is an excellent jumping off point to begin gathering relevant data and research the plethora of proven safety countermeasures. The resource guide is a curated list of organizations, tools, and websites to be used in supporting Vision Zero efforts. Connecting our community with vetted data and other critical information sources makes us stronger advocate for the changes necessary to save lives. In the same way, the safe system approach works by overlapping multiple types of strategies: safe roads, safe road users, safe vehicles, safe speeds, and post-crash care. We can build upon what we know works to adapt and innovate projects, policy, and educational outreach that centers the safety of our neighbors. Continuing with empowering our community with actionable knowledge, the Bicycle and Pedestrian Laws and Statutes cheat sheet booklet makes it easier for any road user to know their rights and responsibilities when sharing the roadway. This quick reference guide is a more portable and accessible way to share current laws, helping everyone become more predictable road users. Next, in our arsenal of educational materials, these updated countermeasure tip cards provide easy to digest information on proven safety countermeasures and explain how they help reduce fatal and serious injury practice. All of these tip cards feature local locations of existing infrastructure throughout Brevard County. Lane narrowing, the local example at Hickory Street in Milner. Roadway reconfiguration at Florida Avenue in Cocoa. Roundabouts, the local example being the roundabout at the intersection of Parada Drive and Lake Andrew Drive in Sierra. Diverging diamond interchanges or DDIs. This one is the local example of Sierra Boulevard and the I-95 interchange in Sierra. Enhanced signage on State Road A1A in Satellite Beach. Chicanes found on Clear Lake Road in Cocoa. Bicycle lanes, the local example here at US 192 in Melbourne. Pedestrian islands found at US 192 and Evans Road in West Melbourne. Pedestrian hybrid beacons or PHBs. This one located also on Clear Lake Road in Cocoa. and rectangular rapid flashing beacons or RRFBs. And this one that we have the example of is from Pineapple Street here in Melbourne. This next tool works hand in hand with the educational tip cards. The bike and pedestrian facility checklist can be used by community members while observing local corridors and identify areas that could benefit from safety countermeasures. By examining the existing corridor infrastructure and data sources like the high-end network, those utilizing the checklist can form a clearer picture of what the specific needs of that corridor are and what may need to be improved. As part of our long-term Vision Zero strategy, we plan to expand the toolkit with audience-specific components tailored to key sectors such as law enforcement, school-based settings, and social media communications. These specialized toolkits will support targeted outreach, education, and advocacy efforts while maintaining alignment with the core Vision Zero goals and FCTPO branding. The toolkit was unveiled at the Vision Zero Summit. We have the will, now what is the way, event on April 14th of this year. The event, which had 60 attendees, included workshop activities and presentations on a range of topics that all work towards creating safer roads in the community. The presentations included enforcement strategies and insights that reduce crashes and support safer roadways by Lieutenant Channing Taylor with the Florida Highway Patrol. The role of injury prevention and reducing traffic-related deaths and injuries with Health First. Jessica Hen with Health First. The power in temporary bicycle and pedestrian safety projects with Connor Ford from the city of Cape Canaveral. And FDOT statewide systemic safety analysis and initiatives of Fanny Christensen with Kittleson and Associates on behalf of FDOT. And by sharing these perspectives across different disciplines and jurisdictions, utilizing this toolkit, making a change in our driving behaviors, and educating ourselves and our neighbors on the importance of proven safety countermeasures, we can save lives and foster a more robust culture of safety in our region. And with that, I need to answer any questions.
Really a question, but I just wanted to say, I really liked the fact that you used a real life image and regard in your gift card that is a lot more here, not just, over in Europe somewhere.
For sure.
I would be very curious to use some of those and projects that we have coming up too as an education piece, so we don't get shut down by the public. Just to show like an example of a roundabout that's already in place and how you can have stats on that, like significantly X amount of less crashes than what we currently have, which is.
And all of the materials are on our website, and even in your package, the PowerPoint itself, if you go to that page that has the tip card kind of broken out, it'll have the stats for how much it reduces fatal and serious injury crashes.
Yeah, that's great.
If any of the municipalities wanted hard copies, they can just reach out to, would it be you or Leah, who would be the best contact to get hard copies?
Probably Leah, but either one of us. Yes.
I got a few questions, a few comments. First of all, this is excellent work. This has come so far. It was pretty brave actually to take all this on and it's a big effort. So I've sat on Vision Zero steering committee, so very happy to see this. So, and it's gotten this far so far. Love the countermeasures. But you know me in the past, I'm always going to raise some pretty light on policy changes and regulation changes for municipalities and revising and updating their codes and using modern standards and design guidelines. So I'm hopeful that in the future, we'll be able to have some more language about that and examples, because I think there's, under natural resources, there are a lot of examples of municipalities and counties and cities that have updated their codes, whether it's design standards for their roadways, municipal roadways, or their developments or land development regulations, how private development interacts with the transportation infrastructure design in their communities. So I'm hopeful that in the future, we can show some national resources on codes and standards, design manuals. That's something that obviously you're gonna be going back to each of the municipalities that were signatories. I think the complete streets, some of the first Vision Zero work. So I'm hopeful that some of those, resolutions that they're asked to pass would really kind of focus on and include that, their codes and standards are part of this, because that happens on a daily basis. When new development comes in and old development or redevelopment comes in for old sites, where all of that rubber hits the road is in design review, and I just don't see that happening. Did a survey, I think, recently, probably about a year or two ago. We asked the municipalities, are they doing these things? Some of them didn't respond, and some of them did respond, and they didn't have the funding to do that, or they didn't have the interest to do that. I think the only one that was doing comprehensively changing their local codes and reviewing it was Palm Bay. They had some initiatives there, and I don't know how far those code standards go. So that's something I hope that this is something that's a work in progress. Those are things that you can look at. I think there's probably some municipal examples that we could find in Florida too, that where they've gone and updated their codes to improve design that improves bicycle ped, transit rider, last mile improvements to systems. So, what got us into a lot of these problems locally with deficient systems is our designs have been auto-centric. We've been doing this for the last 20 or 30 years that way. And our codes really haven't changed to adapt for that. And that's something that really needs to happen, in my opinion. So I hope that's something we can look at. I've made some notes here based on just my observations since the workshop. And we have a facility checklist here. Hopefully we can develop a policy review checklist where the municipality looks at their comp plan, their LDRs, their subdivision regulations, their zoning regs, their municipal infrastructure design codes for the roadways and streets. I mean, that's all where the rubber hits the road in making a lot of these changes. So hopefully that's something we could look at. And even creating maybe a toolkit on policies, codes, and designs. Because that's one thing I think is still very important. And I hope we can consider. So,
as Liam mentioned, like the toolkit is meant to be flexible and ever evolving. So we're always looking at new things that we can pull together and put in one place so that it's a one-stop shop and easy for people to grasp and take it and run.
yeah, thanks. Appreciate that. And I think even at our, we had a good workshop with the Vision Zero. We had 50 members attend. I can remember in the previous Vision Zero workshop that we had that there was some good question and answer, and it didn't come up as much as at this session. But there were many speakers that said when questions were raised about design codes and making those changes happen locally on a municipal and a county level, they were supportive of that. So hopefully I may have some ideas too on best practices and resources that we can put together possibly to do that. So hope that's something you're open to, and I'll leave my notes with you guys tonight. So appreciate it. No, don't get me wrong, I appreciate the work. This is not easy, but I think when we're going back to these municipalities, they've got leadership changes. They may have had staff changes at the municipalities. The elected officials may have changed. And this is not an easy sell, don't get me wrong, because changing your codes and doing those types of things, it's not easy. It's not cheap either. It takes time. It takes the county attorney. It takes your city planners. It takes a lot of public hearings to get those things done. And it's not easy, but it's one of the things that really has to be taken, got to take that on. That's one of the realities of this. And I'll just say this is, my observations being here in planning and development and working with the TPO, and especially in our low to moderate income neighborhoods, this has been an issue for 20 years or more about, we're still looking at development the same way. I can't say everybody is, but we're still looking at development a certain way because our codes limit us to what we can do. Unless we've adopted a policy that says, hey, we're looking at the state manual, we're looking at these other state standards. So thank you.
Really, most municipalities subscribe to, I think, what they call muni code. I think it's a standard generic approach that the county is using. And again, I'm going to tag on to something that Alan's mentioned there. But the thought being possibly that from Vision Zero, if we could get the developers of the code for this Florida area to kind of focus on certain, this is the priority as a county. All the communities have already, as you mentioned, bought into the agreement to subscribe to changing their approaches, not just, placating the concept itself, but basically, if we could get the developers of the code, they'd have another opportunity, and you may have all already addressed it, but the thing being is that if every community comes to say, okay, we're going to try from scratch to change this, then we're going to have 50 different versions of attempting to fix. But the communicated guys, I apologize, I'm not up on the logistics of what it is, but again, they have the generic, they're the authority. If the authority is the county, goes to them to introduce it to the subordinate municipalities within the county, then there might be a more successful implementation, I guess, of change. Bottom line, thanks.
Good. Thank you for those thoughts too. And I think part of this toolkit, with it being our first rendition, I guess, is 2020. Thinking about the general public and speaking about public pushback. A lot of this toolkit in specific was meant for the general public as well. A teacher that's coming up and they're saying, I don't like the roundabout that's near my school. Why is it there? And having those educational materials. But moving forward, we are looking at specific toolkits that are for specific audiences that would in particular benefit. And it sounds like there is a world where we create one specifically for policy developers or transportation planners.
Guys are good planners. That's good. All right.
Thank you.
In any of the action items, I mean, that's just all information. All right, we're
At 6:37.
let's move on to number 7. Are there any member comments, questions? Drew?
Show up late, we talked. So I want to thank DOT for them. Thank you for, we had a study done on a trail crossing in Malabar, Marie Street and Malabar Road. It did not provide this answer we were hoping for, but it was a thorough approach. And what they did, our old adage is the people will come, the horse equestrian traffic will show when it's safe, but so you don't see horses till it's safe. That's that catch-22. But it was a thorough approach. There was acknowledgement. I want to thank Sarah, you provided that to us as well. The town itself is going to take action, going to acknowledge the bicycle and pedestrian observations that were made. So happened that during the study, albeit a thorough one, did not encounter equestrian traffic that day. So it did not go the way we thought it would. But again, I think signage will change there to acknowledge what was observed at that time. So thank you for the effort. I didn't want that to go on another stuff.
I can go. I have also newish to the board, but learned a little bit of a drawback to sidewalks, which might be sounding weird on the pedestrian board. But we get, as a city, and I've heard this is not uncommon, several settlements in an event that someone trips. And these can be in the tens of thousands each settlement before, and it involves lawyers, and it's huge, what I'm coming to learn, money suck from the city, and I can kind of understand maybe a potential drawback. I don't know the way forward of these settlements. I've asked our risk manager to look into it more, maybe do a cost analysis, but we're looking at ways to save money, and I'm looking at sidewalk projects, but then also upwards of maybe 12 settlements a year on average that we're having to do with individuals who trip and fall. It's city, very not uncommon. So something that just to think about when pushing. I maybe understand why Merritt Island doesn't want to, that refuge doesn't want to take on a sidewalk, just the other half of the argument there. That being said, our downtown is fully funding their, Trail Town Amenities project, so they've done a extensive look with, Kimley Horn on how to improve different nodes of bicycle intersections and path trails. And, that will merge well, I think, with that Sun Trails project. And then we're also looking at updating our Broad Street, which I think I'm gonna need the help of you guys probably with, it's a very interesting redesign of what we're trying to make. One, safer, but you're talking about one of those pedestrian restways.
Refuge islands.
Refuge islands, yeah, no, this is like a park in the middle of two separating diverging streets, and it's gorgeous. It looks way high scale for what these people have drafted for us and that our downtown is looking at. But I imagine it's going to be an uphill battle with public people thinking, no, I don't want this. So I might, but that's exciting, something that could be happening. I don't know if these also count as partnership funding for when the TPO has projects. If we're putting in investment at a certain level, if that triggers a match of any sort, does it have to be directly towards the project? These are all just things I wrote down as you were talking. And my last point, I made this at a FDOT, made this point in an FDOT meeting, that certain towns, specifically on the west of Florida, are known really well for their trails. And I don't know that we've marketed ours well enough as a trail town. So I'm wondering how we can capitalize on that more, if there's like an educational or outreach portion to just show how much revenue from the economic development side, just really make that point clear. So that was a lot of asks. That was a lot of content. 5.
Lily, I just had a question. You said you have settlements with people that have done trip and fall on your infrastructure. Is it because your infrastructure is in poor condition, or are they falling and are these like brand new sidewalks they're falling on? Are these substandard sidewalks where there's tree roots growing on the sidewalks? What are they like?
I mean, it could just be a tree that bumped the grade up maybe 3 inches. Someone tripped some balls. Susan City. And apparently it happens a lot more than we realize. So maybe ask your city, how much did you pay out in sidewalk settlements alone? Because I don't know how that should move forward though. I don't know if it's a system of like, do we make it the owner's responsibility to pay for those? Can we get that off the city? I think Orange County might have done that. I'm not quite sure. So that's why I kind of opened it up to the.
Yeah, just if it's deficiency in maintenance and there's a problem with these sidewalks, obviously having new sidewalks and renovated sidewalk systems long-term is going to be better for liability with the city. So that's why I was just trying to find out what are the context or the circumstances of the sidewalk falls and the claims. So
And who is maintaining?
yeah, and then who's the main? Yeah, exactly.
I'll turn it on for everybody else. I think you can hear me well.
Yeah.
Town of Malabar, I work with a couple different hats. One is HOA president of 130 property developers.
Well,
Sorry, yeah, I'm talking about that. Okay. Among some hats I'm wearing, but as a HOA president, familiar with the sidewalks, because the community that I'm with has the only sidewalks in town. And because the oak trees that were planted by the sidewalks have since grown and the sidewalks have raised exactly the situation, there's myriad issues in the community, which has been conveyed to the town. The town is responsible. But we have encountered this situation. But to answer your question, it's my understanding that the town of Malabar, because been reporting these sidewalk issues for quite a while, and it's growing. Town has taken a stance that in those circumstances will the town approve a plan where it involves, even if it's town roads, would not have the sidewalks there. So the point being, as far as taking it back, I don't know how you can, but to prevent it in the future, you may want to establish, that would be a code situation where, yeah, you need public sidewalks, but for a community to be established, it would have to supply that infrastructure and adopt it. But that would have to do with plat zoning as well as I'm not sure how they chose it, but Now in Malabar, it's my understanding, if there's a new development goes in, town is not on the sidewalks. That's probably because the community I'm with, again, oak trees shouldn't have gone in, they did, it happened. You know, things happen, but to prevent the future is huge. The other thing that may help, city there's been some experimentation with not so much shaving the sidewalk because it makes it brittle and it's a temporary scenario. Either removing the roots and putting the same slab back if it's been cut, that has, I've seen work at least temporarily. The other thing is to, basically put in some kind of ramp material, but it's almost a rubberized, adaptation that some manufacturers sell, where it can adapt quicker, but smooth off the surface. So at least it's a mitigation, but the communities shouldn't themselves, the HOA shouldn't take that on if that's their case, because it's not their property. So we've always told our residents, don't touch the sidewalk, they're not ours. But again, you know, the oak trees, it's reality. Trees, vegetation grows, sidewalk should. So the other thing would be that material that I suggested for the mitigation of those things, that can be used instead of a concrete or asphalt sidewalk. And that actually adapts a little bit better. It lets the water through. That may be another alternative that would at least alleviate some of the future losses.
Sarah, do you want
So, the American with Disability Act requires every single municipality to have a sidewalk transition plan. And within that sidewalk transition plan, you generally will talk about what maintenance you're going to do. And as long as you have a plan and you're actively working towards the plan, you know, you're showing an effort to maintain the ADA of your sidewalk, but every single municipality in the county, whether it's the county or Titusville, should have an ADA transition plan.
That's a good point.
So, and like, for example, also Space Coast Area Transit is also required to have an ADA transition plan for all of their bus facilities. So, I mean, that might be something to talk to your public works. Does it need to be updated, like, or, you know, and how that potentially could play into it, because
I think those help to, I don't know about other cities, but it's a situation where you might have, 6,000 feet of sidewalk and 2 guys, and that's not their full-time job, it's sidewalk maintenance, but they're doing curbing and all sorts of stuff. So it's getting harder, I think, for the cities trying to figure out a way, but I appreciate all this input. That's fantastic. Thank you.
I don't think the answer is to make the homeowners responsible for possible lawsuits. I mean, all of this is within all those who are as old as I am can remember when lawyers weren't allowed to advertise publicly. They're only yellow pages, and so much of this has been generated by the personal. There's no going back, I don't think, but it's generated by the personal injury. I mean, and people having no responsibility. I mean, you're walking down a sidewalk and it's not your responsibility to see a 2-inch jump from a broken piece of sidewalk. I mean, I think it's one thing if a really badly broken up piece of sidewalk's been reported 500 times to the city and they've done nothing about it. But I mean, Alan mentioned, are they substandard sidewalks? Well, every time somebody writes a new standard, every other sidewalk is now non-standard or substandard, unless, it's the same standard has been improved upon. And that doesn't mean it's unusable, right?
or does it mean it's unsafe necessarily?
You're talking about, you shouldn't have planted the oak trees there. Well, I disagree, like architecturally, within the scope of trees, I think they're rated a 2 out of 10. That's one of the least aggressive trees on. So, I mean, you tend to get broken sidewalks when you have a sidewalk that's too thin and you have a big root that happens to line up with an expansion joint. But still, there are many, many, many way worse trees to plant. And you think about your own community, how much less enjoyable that sidewalk along your lake would be without that string of oak trees that I helped Mike Tillman plant 30 years ago.
It was platinum too,
Yeah.
so
one of the first trail days I ever did. Because I was in the same office as this guy whose wife was worked at a nursery and was planting all these trees and, you know, and that set me off on, oh my God, these are great trees. I've got them all over my yard, you know. I have no grass because I've got all those trees, but I mean, there's gotta be some happy medium that, you know, I mean, fix the sidewalks where they get cracked. It's just really not that hard. You bust them out, cut the oak tree roots that are causing the problem. Usually the oak trees are fine. And you build it back, you know, I mean, I'm just saying, it's like, you go to places like Savannah, Georgia, and there's 6-foot diameter oak trees everywhere. And they have sidewalks, you know, and you're like.
In between the house.
Right.
And the street.
Hey,
I think it's difficult for old, Titusville's got some challenges because you've got some older infrastructure. You have some of the oldest Melbourne, Cocoa. You guys have some of the oldest infrastructure pre-World War II. It's grid systems with streets and sidewalks that are, you know, that are older. So that is a challenge, but I wouldn't think this, you know, part of this group is we want to keep sidewalks and make them safer. And, you know, shading is a big deal in Florida. When you have a shaded sidewalk, it cools the street and people feel more comfortable walking. It's also a very good traffic calming tool. So it gets down to design and maintenance and knowing, you know, really inventorying your sidewalk system and having a maintenance, just dealing with the reality that you're going to have a maintenance plan for it long term. And it's not easy for an older city. I understand that, but that's something that you really want. I would think you'd want to keep and encourage. And it's sad to see a suburban or a rural community say, we don't want sidewalks in our, you know, in our newly platted subdivisions. I could see maybe having sidewalks on one side of the street, maybe not on both sides of the street, but I would think you'd want to have those interior walkway systems that link to trails and all those good things that you're trying to promote. So I know it's not easy, but I think that's something that, especially older cities, I sympathize with you, but I think there's some design things that can be done. It's a big part of maintaining the value of your community and it's, yeah, especially in redevelopment too. So, but there are other plants too, you know, Chinese elm. There are other trees that may not be as invasive as oaks. So, you know, over time working with the IFAS, working with the, you know, the extension service. I know they've done a lot of work on this. What do we put, you know, what can you put in the sidewalk systems? What kind of blocks, you know, I don't know what I forget what they call them, but you know, there's ways to stop the roots from getting underneath there. And then there's other tree types too. So I'm always big on shade. If there's shade, it does so much for a street corridor. I mean, people want to walk, I'll just repeat it, people want to walk more on a cooler surface. I think it helps calm the street. So, you know, there's the benefits of keeping those sidewalks. Just some ideas. Anybody else have any comments to share? Topics, issues? One thing I wanted to share was, I think Sarah and I talked about it this morning a little when we did the briefing, was the more desire for some more long range trail projects. You know, start thinking about where you think new projects need to be for trails. You know how long it takes to plan a trail and get things done. So we don't have those coming online. We need to do that. That's what we do as a group here is we're a trail, you know, part of our deal is planning for new trails. I know the South Brevard Trails plan is underway. It's almost completed. It's
We
completed.
adopted that last September.
September, you got some trails potentially there, but there may be some other locations too. So really think about that. Now, whether it's just linkages to exist, you know, current plan trails, but think, you know, are there linkages you need to make? I know that we've done that. Sometimes we were working with our neighborhood strategy areas and our CDBG projects, you know, we've done some little links, but they've made a big difference. So if you're think about some links, outer loops. Murray, you've been big about the rural area loops along the trail systems, along the dike systems, and maybe having that go northward. Not sure what the dudes are interested in here doing over time, but for connectivity through through Vieira along the St. Johns River corridor.
We've actually had the MBA's had a couple of meetings with Judah. We've had a couple of meetings with the Vieira company.
Okay.
Proposing like some ideas for, there are all kinds of corridors. There's one corridor that ends up right behind Costco that ranges way out towards the, it's all rideable now on gravel and levee bank tops and, power line right of ways. But I mean, so things like that. And still one of my favorites, that I presented to this committee 20 years ago, it was on our list for 10 years and gradually worked its way down and dropped off the bottom, but it was what I called the Tri-City Trail, and it was just above Palm Bay Road, about a half mile north on a large power line corridor, and it went across all the way from potentially Palm Bay to West Melbourne, to back to Palm Bay, and I think it might have touched Melbourne somewhere, but I mean, it was just, all of those cities are, especially West Melbourne and Palm Bay, the line jumps up and down right there, but
Did you have a sketch of that?
oh, I had it all mapped out and had it measured and had cross canals and stretch tapes and about a 30 PowerPoint presentation. We had but what was interesting about it was it ran all the way to John Conlon. That area got a little bit dicey because of the wetlands and it's funny, an eagle's nest was right there. That was a major problem. And we had our eels program basically just knocked down an eagle's nest in Malabar. So apparently they're not that important. But in any case, that's still a viable corridor. If we still ride it on bicycles, it's sort of wide open. It doesn't, I mean, it's all FPL corridor and they own most of that property. And we've had at that time, way back, meetings with FPL where at that time they were, as long as it didn't interfere with their service road that they used to maintain the towers, they were all right with it, looking at interlocal agreements. And they had just done one like that in Palm Bay, which is now what we call a Claremont Trail. Anyway, but I could resurrect that for you.
Are those candidate projects?
I'd have to, specifically the Tri-City Trail, I'd have to go look at our bike ped master plan to see if it's still in there. It's before my time. I know that you've talked quite a bit about it. But I mean, we're always updating our bike ped, or we always can update our bike ped master plan. We are running out of time.
Yeah. I think we're just about, you want to be done by 7, so.
Yeah, we have to be done.
Yeah,
That's our agreement with security.
Thanks for all the comments. I think we've covered everything that we discussion and more, so. Do you want to make a motion to adjourn?